York, La Cosa Nostra families. Really, there's no mafia in America. In America, it's called La Cosa Nostra.
Got it.
And, he was a highly publicized figure, always under law enforcement scrutiny, always a major target of law enforcement and the media. So I grew up in that atmosphere. There was law enforcement around us all the time. My dad was very important to me. I loved him very much. He was my idol growing up. And so I grew up, kind of in an atmosphere of hating law enforcement, to be quite honest. I hated the government, and I hated the police. And it wasn't because he taught me that way. He taught me to respect the law, but it was really because of what I witnessed as a kid growing up. I just viewed them as the enemy. So I grew up in that kind of mind frame. My dad did his best to keep that out of our family life. In the house, we were a family. He tried not to let that interfere with us, although inevitably it did, because he had many, many arrests. He went to trial 3 times in the state of New York, and then once in the feds in New York, where he was eventually convicted and sentenced to 50 years in prison.
Wow.
That was kind of it was a life-changing event for me, because I was a pre-med student in Hofstra University in Long Island when Dad was convicted and eventually sentenced to 50 years.
Wow.
And my life changed at that point. A lot of things went haywire in our family, and certainly my life took a very big turn at that point.
Wow. Now, growing up, what part of Brooklyn?
I was in Greenpoint, Williamsburg section.
Okay, so Greenpoint, Williamsburg section, which I'm assuming, like anything else, was a burgeoning area for, Italian Americans. It's not the traditional Bensonhurst, as you know, but it's a different area of Brooklyn, so you grew up around it. So what were growing up? Let's talk about the positive. What were some of the perks growing up? 15 years old, 17 years old. What were some of the perks of being a Mafia son at the time?
Well, my dad, again, being such a prominent figure, he was very outgoing. And, we had ringside tables at the Copacabana.
Oh, wow.
Just about everybody from Frank Sinatra to Sammy Davis to everybody you can imagine.
Wow.
So in that regard, we lived a nice lifestyle. So those were the perks. But the problem with that is my dad was a target from early on in my life. So,
okay.
And he was in and out of jail and in and out of trial situations, and always seemed to be battling something. So as nice as it was, it also had a pretty dark side that we were just constantly embroiled in. But again, he did his best to keep that away from us and to try to keep us as a family. I was one of 7 kids, so he did his best. But, inevitably his world came tumbling down, and obviously it impacted the entire family.
Got it. And you would, what we were characterized as kind of like a good Italian kid. You grew up in Brooklyn. I believe you got good marks in, in high school. You got into Hofstra, which is not an easy feat, and you were pre-med, but you took a turn. So walk us through that.
Yeah, I was as normal a kid as you can be. I was an athlete in school. I played all 3 sports, and so I grew up trying to be as normal as I possibly can. But, then after Dad gets convicted and sentenced to 50 years, which was basically, in our view, a death sentence, since he was 50 when he went into prison, Joe Colombo, who was the boss of the family at that time, we were obviously very close, and he kind of took me under his wing. And I started to meet a lot of my dad's friends, and, they were saying, Mike, what are you doing going to school? If you don't help your father out, he's going to die in prison. Because I knew it was a bad case. My father told me, he was convicted of allegedly masterminding a nationwide string of bank robberies.
Okay.
And he was innocent. I'll take that to my grave. I investigated that case thoroughly. It was a bad case. It was a frame-up. And when he told me that, I believed him, and it became a mission of mine to try to help him out. And, I was one of the older ones in the family, so I had to help my mom and the kids. So I went to see him in Leavenworth, and I said, Dad, I'm not going to school anymore. If I don't help you out, you're going to die in here. And he was upset. He knew this would be disruptive in my life, but he also knew my mind was made up because I was a pretty headstrong kid. And he said, if you're going to be on the street, I want you on the street the right way. In his mind, the right way was to become a member of his life. So he, at that point, proposed me for membership in the family. That was back in, I would say, 71, 72.
Wow. So you, may I ask this, Are you and were you your father's son? Because it seems like you were.
Yeah, I was. I mean, there's no doubt about that. I mean, there was talk about it, but there is a story about how that and why there was talk